The Dearborn Independent, June 11th, 1927, Volume 27, Number 34. Mr. Ford's page of the Dearborn Independent, The Bubble Reputation. The fear of losing one's reputation is a bogey that haunts men perseveringly. But this is through confusing the word reputation with character. It is character that really matters. Reputation is merely an idealized likeness of a man that public opinion has drawn from the gallery of its imagination. Through striving to live up to this reputation, a man may prove false to his better self and leaving character in the background. Lose sight of the things that are of the utmost importance to the general welfare. Accomplishments may be barred and real service lost if reputation is made an idol. Reputation is what people think a man is. Character is what he really is. Usually reputation and character go along hand in hand. What people think a man is, he is very likely to be, but not always. There are just a sufficient number of differences between men's reputation and characters to make a sweeping statement impossible. One man has a reputation for ready wit. Another, during some retentive period of his mental life, have stored up much knowledge of the sort which quickly turns to attic lumber and has a reputation for learning. Another, because of some act performed in a moment of irritation, gets the reputation of being quick-tempered or courageous. Another, a normal man, not self-centered, but living free in mind and body, does for a friend without thinking of it, an act involving danger to himself but affecting the other's salvation. He awakes to find himself a hero, but the hero discovers for himself the great difference between reputation and the inner sense thereof. There are some men who regard their reputation as assets, who ought to regard them as liabilities. And they're good reputations too, in the moral sense. It is the mistake to think that it is the bad reputation that is always the liability. Good reputations sometimes hang like millstones around a man's neck. They are in reality, in many cases, handicaps. A man has a reputation for cautiousness. Well, cautiousness is not always a virtue. Sometimes a man ought to be cautious and sometimes daring. Sometimes he ought to walk across the street and sometimes he ought to run. To commit himself to follow either course all the time would be in utmost folly. Other men have a reputation for what is called common sense, but see what a hindrance a reputation for common sense may become. A man may say to himself, I have always been known as a man of common sense. I have always done what people do, with an element of protective cautious thrown in. People do business with me because they know I am safe and sane. Yet I have a vision which I know is safe with a higher safety and sane with a higher sanity than any of my neighbors know, and I am moved to follow this vision. But if I do, bang goes my reputation for common sense. In such an instance, a reputation is fatal to a man's growth. He is not living up to his real self. He is living down to the self that he was 20 or 30 years ago. He forgets that what probably fitted him 20 years ago does not fit him now. He is simply refusing to outgrow the features of the portrait called reputation, which public opinion had painted its own imagination. The real likeness would be character. Public opinion is, of course, a powerful restraining influence on those who need it, but too many men are afraid of being fools. In certain cases, however, public opinion keeps a man better than he would otherwise be, if not better morally, at least better as far as his social desirability is concerned. But no doubt there are cases, and many men feel the truth of it, where reputation keeps a man from being as good and as useful as he might be, because in action of service he might be led into unusual. But sometimes it is not a bad thing to risk being a fool for the righteousness' sake. Quite often such fools live long enough to prove that they were not fools, or the same thing is proved by their work which lives after them. Public opinion is sometimes at fault. The public makes mistakes. No man is ever so good as the public wants its good idols to be, and no man is ever so bad as the public wants its bad idols to be. The tendency of the public is to exaggerate. It prefers colored pictures to those that are perfectly plain. It is attracted by the unusual far more than by the usual. But these pictures do not always please, and what is acclaims today, it may condemn tomorrow. It will do the same thing in regard to the reputations of men, and in the end, it is only character that will count. There are men who, for the sake of moral usefulness among men, must make deliberate sacrifice of otherwise desirable things, and in doing so they may lose a certain amount of reputation. But in the long run they usually receive that meed of honor to which they are rightfully entitled. They may have been justified in saying, "I cannot do that because it would injure the influence which I now possess in the special channel of work." But frequently this very fear of damaging that influence will prevent them from bringing about some worthwhile accomplishment that will more than make up for any temporary loss of prestige. Man must change in order to progress. Progress means change, although change does not always mean progress. And the bogey of the built-up reputation must not be allowed to stand in the way. Let well enough alone is the good motto if properly applied, but it sometimes means stagnation, and stagnation is the death warrant of improvement.